Most focus in Washington right now is, of course, after we got over the excitement over the elimination of Osama bin Laden, the talk goes back to the subject that it has to be on, which is debt ceiling and how we get our fiscal house in order over the next couple of years.
What are we doing specifically for jobs? I mean, specifically.
Yeah, well, unfortunately the answer to that is that at least in the House, we're not doing much for jobs. And, it is enormously frustrating to me because as I talk to my constituents, they want us focused on jobs and continuing to improve the economy. But the Republican majority in the House has taken us to eliminating funding for Planned Parenthood, doing right by the oil companies, making it easier for them to drill. That's my question exactly. Where are the jobs bills? We have seen none since this Congress has been seated in January of this year.
Okay, and do you think the stimulus in the past has been a failure because of the unemployment jumping back up to 9%?
Well, there's no way to characterize the stimulus as a failure, right? I mean, the unemployment rate moves around a little bit depending on who's looking for work. And look, it's still too high any way you slice it. But remember, 2 years ago, before the stimulus, every month this country was losing 800,000 jobs a month. Today, for the last 4 months, we've added 250,000 jobs every month. That's a difference between losing 800,000 jobs and adding 250,000 jobs in the private sector. That's a huge change. The markets are back. People are feeling a little bit more confident. So to say that the stimulus was a failure is just an outright misstatement of what happened.
A lot of the incentive for jobs to go overseas to China, for example, is because of, well, a lot of reasons. What can we do to give an incentive? Maybe a tariff, or what do you propose?
Well, I think the smartest thing we could do very quickly is recognize that we've got the highest corporate tax rate in the world. At 35%, our multinationals have every incentive to build plants in places like Ireland and places like Asia where tax rates are much lower. Now, what we need to do is lower that rate and get rid of a lot of the loopholes, which oddly enough, even though we have the highest corporate tax rate in the world, allow companies to pay much lower taxes than the legal rate. So we would be much more competitive if we reduced the upper end tax rate on our corporations and got rid of a lot of the loopholes and whatnot that allow them to dodge taxes. A world where they are, competitive on taxes is something we could do quickly and would really help bring money back into this country, investment back in this country, and jobs here.
President Obama upset a lot of people where he said that Israel should go back to its 1967 borders. I mean, that was a generation ago. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, well, the president didn't say that Israel should go back to its 1967 borders. What he said was that there should be lines drawn based on those borders, which is different than saying it should be those borders, with, and this is what he said, swaps that are mutually agreed on that would recognize the fact that the Israelis have settlements in areas that were post-1967 where there's hundreds of thousands or at least tens of thousands of people living. So, look, I'm not here to explain the president. What I think is that the United States should really apply itself to getting the two parties to negotiate what we all know is the answer, which is a two-state solution, where the Palestinians are living behind reasonable boundaries in a secure way, and where the Israelis are guaranteed peace. And that means recognition. It means, final solutions to many of the problems that have bedeviled the region, like Jerusalem, like water, and a variety of other things.
A lot of people in the room were discussing about the deficit. What is happening with the oil that's being pumped out of Iran right now? To the victors goes the spoil. What are we doing with that oil? Is it just going into the free market? Are we getting compensated for our war efforts as our allies?
You mean Iraq, right?
Iraq, I'm
sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. We have over time, certainly in the first Gulf War, been reimbursed for our expenses by the region. Iraq has only recently gotten back up on its feet and pumped oil. I will tell you what, though, we have spent, as we discussed inside, almost $1 trillion over time in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I would very much like to see oil-rich nations where we, for example, in Iraq, overthrew Saddam Hussein, reimburse us for some of the costs that we spent there.
The Arab nations were asking us to go into Libya and bomb them to dispose of the leader. And these are not poor nations. Did they offer to pay for any of these $1 million missiles that are being lobbed over?
Well, I hope they will in the final analysis, because you're right. The Arab League asked us in, and the Arab League has some very, very wealthy members. And at the end of the day, I had some concerns when I woke up to learn that we were militarily engaged in Libya. We just can't do that all around the world. There were some special circumstances, including saving a lot of lives that would have been lost in Benghazi, that make me pretty quiet in my criticism of the president on this issue, because there are tens of thousands of people alive in Libya today who would not be if we had not intervened with NATO and the Arab League. But yeah, I'd like to see, in general, not just in Libya but elsewhere, we are providing the security for the world. We are the world's policemen, and that costs us something like $600 billion a year. And yeah, we need some help. We need some help from the very wealthy nations that have lived behind our shield for a very long time.
Okay, and lots have changed since you've taken office. With the political climate changed, can you beat Chris Shays again?
Well, I don't have any reason to believe that Chris Shays is running again. Beat him once, look, at this point, I don't have an announced opponent. I'm sure I will get one, and that'll be the moment to start placing bets.
But if he ran, do you think you can beat him?
Look, I won by 6 points in the last election when Democrats around the country were obliterated. I did better in the 2010 election than I did in the 2008 election. So they say there's two ways to run an election, which is unopposed and scared. So I'm going to run in one of those two ways, but I was certainly gratified by the vote of confidence I got from my constituents in November.